Get out! Get out of my house, now! Jessica screamed, her face contorted in a fury I'd never witnessed before. The coffee cup I'd dropped lay in shattered pieces on the kitchen floor, its dark contents spreading into a growing stain across the pristine white tiles she guarded so fiercely. You have 10 minutes to grab your things and disappear. My hands trembled so violently I could barely grip the small suitcase I kept stashed in the guest room closet. At 67, I never imagined I'd be cast out of my own son's home like an intruder, like a criminal. As Jessica's shrill voice continued to echo from the living room, I silently slipped the USB drive into my coat pocket, the one holding every incriminating document I'd copied last night. Proof that my only son was tangled in corporate fraud. And worse, his wife was a full accomplice. Don't think I don't know what you've been doing, you meddling old woman. Her voice, sharp as glass, sliced through the hall, rifling through our papers, snooping into our lives. I offered no reply. With what little dignity remained, I zipped the suitcase shut and walked toward the front door. Jessica blocked my path, arms crossed, eyes blazing with cold fire. "You're not telling Michael anything about today," she hissed, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I'll tell him you decided to go back to your apartment, that you missed your own things." I met her gaze, those same eyes that had once regarded me with such false sweetness, saying, "Mrs. Susan, you're like a mother to me." I uttered not a single word. I simply walked past her, feeling the heavy weight of the USB drive in my pocket, a stone pressed against my hip. The door slammed shut behind me. You must be wondering how a 67-year-old mother arrives at such a crossroads. How a woman who always lived quietly, who raised her son alone after being widowed young, ends up expelled from his home with only a small suitcase and a USB drive brimming with dangerous secrets. It all began about 3 months ago, when the walls of my small downtown apartment started weeping dark patches of dampness. The building manager explained the problem was severe. A leak stemming from the upstairs apartment, where a pipe had ruptured during a shoddy renovation. "It's going to take a while to fix, Mrs. Susan. Maybe a few weeks." It was Michael who insisted I stay with them. My only son, a 42-year-old executive, perpetually busy. Yet in that moment, he seemed genuinely, deeply concerned. "Mom, there's no way you're staying in a hotel. We have an empty guest room. It's just for a few weeks." I hesitated. I'd always fiercely guarded my independence since my husband passed over 30 years ago. I raised Michael alone, teaching math in public schools, saving every last penny so he could attend the best schools. I never wanted to be a burden. "I don't want to inconvenience you and Jessica," I gently argued. Inconvenience? Not a chance. Jess will love having you around. She even suggested it herself. And so, one quiet Sunday afternoon, I temporarily moved into their sprawling apartment in the swanky part of town. It was decorated with the kind of minimalist modernity you see gracing magazine pages. Neutral tones, abstract art, designer furniture. So starkly different from my cozy place, overflowing with cherished memories and faded photographs. Jessica greeted me with a polite hug. She was 15 years Michael's junior, always immaculately elegant with her perfectly straightened brown hair and clothes that whispered expensive in a language I didn't understand. "Mrs. Susan, it's so wonderful to have you here. It'll be just like having my own mom nearby." Her mother had lived in Portugal for years. I'd never met her. The first few days passed uneventfully. I took pains to occupy as little space as possible, careful not to disturb their routine. I woke early, a lifelong habit from decades of teaching, and prepared a simple breakfast. Sometimes I'd bake blueberry muffins, the kind Michael used to devour as a kid. It was on the 5th day that I noticed the first subtle shift in Jessica. She entered the kitchen while I was washing the breakfast dishes. Mrs. Susan. Her voice was carefully modulated, but laced with an unyielding edge. I'd prefer if you didn't use my special pans. The one you used for the oatmeal is imported. I'm sorry, dear. I didn't know. She offered a thin smile, but it never reached her eyes. No problem. Just letting you know. Small incidents like that began to accumulate. A steady drip-drip of subtle reprimands. The way I folded the towels wasn't correct. The detergent I used on the countertops wasn't suitable for the type of stone. The way I arranged the books I was reading on the guest room nightstand clashed with the room's aesthetic. Michael was rarely home. He'd leave before dawn, return after dark. When I cautiously brought up Jessica's behavior, he merely chuckled and dismissed it, saying I was exaggerating. Mom, Jess is just a perfectionist. Architect thing. Don't take it personally. But I knew there was more. I caught it in their quick, guarded glances, in their hushed whispers on the phone when they thought I wasn't listening, in the way their conversations abruptly ceased the moment I entered a room. It was a Tuesday, about 3 weeks after my arrival, when everything shattered. Michael had left for a business trip and Jessica was at her office. I was alone in the apartment and needed to jot down an important message from the doctor who had called to reschedule my appointment. I searched for paper and a pen in the living room, but found nothing. I remembered seeing a notepad in the office, a small room they rarely used, preferring to work at the dining table or in their bedroom. I opened the office door and flicked on the light. The desk was buried under a mound of papers. I swear I had no intention of snooping. I just needed a sheet of paper and a pen. But as I shifted some documents to reach the notepad, I saw the name of Michael's company on an official document, emblazoned with the seal of the Justice Department. My heart seized. A lawsuit? Was my son being sued? My legs suddenly too weak to hold me, I sank into the nearest chair. I began to read, first with a dull confusion, then with an escalating horror. Michael was accused of corporate fraud. Something about embezzlement, falsifying financial reports. The technical jargon swam before my eyes, but the core message was chillingly clear. My son could go to prison. And then, in another document, I saw Jessica's signature. Not just once, but multiple times. On contracts, on bank transfers to offshore accounts. She wasn't merely privy to the scheme. She was an active, willing participant. I heard the distinct click of the front door opening, my heart hammering against my ribs. I quickly rearranged the papers exactly as they had been and slipped out of the office. Mrs. Susan, are you there? Jessica's voice, surprisingly light, drifted through the apartment. I'm here, dear. Just looking for a pen to write down a message. She appeared in the hallway, her eyes sweeping over my face, searching for a tell. A flicker of deceit. Find what you needed? No, not really. I'll just use my phone to jot it down. That night, sleep was a distant memory. I tossed and turned, every thought a relentless replay of what I'd discovered. My son, my only son, entangled in something so grave. And his wife, his accomplice. What in God's name was I supposed to do? Around 3 a.m, a cold resolve settled over me. I quietly slipped out of bed and returned to the office. With trembling hands, I photographed every document with my phone. Then, I found a forgotten USB drive in a drawer and painstakingly copied every file from the computer that seemed related to the case. For the next 2 days, I perfected my pretense. I smiled at Jessica, offered innocuous comments about the weather, cooked dinner when she called to say she'd be late. But inside, I was utterly, irrevocably shredded. On Thursday evening, Michael returned from his trip. He and Jessica locked themselves in their bedroom, and though I tried to block it out, the muffled sounds of their argument still reached me. My name was mentioned several times. The next morning, Jessica was a stark contrast to her usual self. Her eyes were swollen and red, her voice raw. She barely spoke to me during breakfast. Michael rushed out, citing an urgent meeting. It was when I was finally alone with her in the kitchen that everything erupted. The cup that slipped from my trembling hands was merely the spark. Now, sitting on a park bench a few blocks from their apartment, I stared at my phone. 10 missed calls from Michael. 3 text messages, asking where I was, claiming Jessica had told him we had a small disagreement, and that I'd decided it was better to return to my own apartment. A convenient lie. My apartment was still uninhabitable. I called my sister, Nancy. She lived in a small, cozy apartment across town. I explained I needed a place to stay for a few days, carefully omitting the grim details. Did something happen, Susan? Your voice sounds strained. I'll tell you later, Nancy. I just need to know if I can stay with you. Of course you can, sis. My home is your home. As I waited for the taxi I'd called, I looked up at the bruised, cloudy sky. Heavy clouds sagged, promising rain. My fingers instinctively traced the outline of the USB drive in my pocket. The undeniable proof of my son and daughter-in-law's crime. What was I going to do with that information? Reporting it would shatter my only son's life. Keeping quiet would make me an accessory. Perhaps being thrown out was the best thing that could have happened. It ripped me from their orbit, forcing me to finally make a choice. That night, tucked away in Nancy's guest room, I watched the rain fall, a steady drumming against the window pane. My phone buzzed again. It was Michael. This time, I answered. Mom? Where are you? I'm worried sick. I'm at Nancy's, I answered, my voice a steady line of control. Why did you leave like that, without a word? Jessica said you two had a silly argument, and you just decided it was better to go back to your apartment. I closed my eyes, a deep, familiar ache settling in my chest. My son, my boy, ensnared in fraud, lying, allowing his wife to treat me with such callous disregard. Michael, we need to talk. Just us, without Jessica. A thick silence stretched across the line. Is something wrong, Mom? Tomorrow, at 10 a.m., at the coffee shop by the park. You know the one. Mom, you're scaring me. What happened? We'll talk tomorrow, I repeated and hung up. I placed the phone on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed. The tears I'd held back all day finally breached their dam. I cried silently, just as I cried when I lost my husband, just as I cried on those late nights grading papers, while Michael slept soundly in the next room. But this time, it wasn't just sadness. There was a fierce, cold determination in those tears. Because the secret I held wasn't merely the knowledge of those documents. It was the dawning courage to do what had to be done, even if it meant losing my son to save him from himself. I picked up the USB drive and held it against my heart. Tomorrow would be the hardest day of my life. But at 67, I'd learned that true love doesn't always mean shielding someone from the consequences of their actions. Sometimes it means standing with them to face those consequences, no matter how agonizing. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city streets clean. Tomorrow, perhaps, it would also wash away my family's sins. Or maybe it would simply reveal how deep the stains those secrets had left on our souls truly were. Only time would tell. And I, Susan, a retired teacher, a mother, a widow, was ready to face whatever came. Because some truths, however painful, demand to come to light. Even if the price is losing everything we love. That night, I barely slept. The USB drive felt heavy in my hands, as if it contained not just data, but the entirety of my family's future. Nancy noticed my restlessness during dinner, but respected my silence. My sister always possessed that quiet gift, knowing precisely when to ask, and when to simply be present. At 6 in the morning, I was already up. I took a long shower, letting the hot water sluice away some of the accumulated tension. I dressed in my navy blue dress suit, the one I reserved for important occasions during my teaching days. I pinned my gray hair into a simple, neat bun. In the mirror, I saw a 67-year-old woman with deep circles under her eyes, but also with a resolute glint I hadn't seen in a very long time. "Going out so early, Susan?" Nancy asked, already brewing coffee in the kitchen. "I have an important meeting at 10, but I need to organize my thoughts first." She poured me a steaming mug of strong coffee. "It's with Michael, isn't it?" I nodded, feeling a familiar lump rise in my throat. "Whatever it is, remember you're the strongest woman I know," my sister said, squeezing my hand firmly across the table. "You raised that boy alone, instilled him with education and values. No one can ever take that from you." If only she truly knew what I'd discovered. But I offered a weak smile of thanks and finished my coffee in silence. I left far too early for the meeting. I walked slowly through the city streets, observing the city stir to life. Vendors raising their shop shutters, hurried commuters on their way to work, the sun beginning to break through the clouds after the night's rain. Life going on, utterly oblivious to my private turmoil. I arrived at the coffee shop by the park at 9:15. I selected a table near the back, offering a clear view of the entrance, yet discreet enough for the conversation to come. I ordered chamomile tea, attempting to soothe my frayed nerves. At 9:50, I saw Michael walk in. My son. Tall like his father, his dark hair already flecked with gray at the temples. The confident stride of a man who always seemed to know what he wanted from life. Or at least, that's what I'd always believed. He spotted me and walked directly to my table. I noticed his worried expression, the dark circles under his eyes mirroring my own. "Mom," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead before settling into the chair across from me. "You had me so worried. What happened?" I truly looked at my son, trying to pierce beyond the polished executive facade. Where was the boy who wept at the sight of an injured bird? The teenager who bristled at injustice? The young man who swore he'd change the world? "Michael, I'm going to ask you this once, and I need you to be completely honest with me," I said, keeping my voice low but unwavering. "Are you involved in fraud at your company?" His face instantly paled. His eyes, so like his father's, first widened in shock, then narrowed in defensive suspicion. "What are you talking about?" His voice was carefully controlled, but I detected a subtle tremor. "Don't lie to me," I replied, leaning slightly across the table. "I saw the documents. I know about the lawsuit, about the transfers, about Jessica's involvement." Michael glanced around nervously, then his gaze snapped back to mine. His expression shifted, from initial shock to something far more calculated. Is that why Jessica fought with you? Because you were prying into our private documents? The word struck me like a physical blow. So that's how he framed it? Me, the busybody, the snoop. Your father and I didn't raise you this way, Michael, I said, feeling tears prick my eyes, but stubbornly refusing to let them fall. We didn't teach you to commit fraud, to lie, to deceive people. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd made since he was a child. You don't understand how the corporate world works, Mom. There are gray areas, procedures everyone does. Stealing has another name, son. It doesn't matter if it's done in a dark alley or an air-conditioned office with a panoramic view. Michael lowered his eyes for the first time. A heavy silence settled between us, broken only by the distant clinking of cups and the low hum of conversations around us. It was Jessica's idea, he finally murmured, so quietly I had to lean forward to catch the words. At first, they were small accounting adjustments, then it just grew. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the brutal impact of that partial confession. And you just agreed? You let her drag you into this? It wasn't like that, he replied, defensive. We were having financial problems. The apartment, the car, the trips. All to keep up appearances. Jessica comes from a wealthy family. She's used to a certain standard. I didn't want to disappoint her. So you preferred to disappoint me? To disappoint your father, even from beyond the grave? Michael looked up, his eyes glistening. Mom, please. I took the USB drive from my pocket and placed it squarely on the table between us. Everything is here, Michael. All the documents, all the proof. He stared at the small object as if it were a live grenade. His hand twitched to grab it, but I placed my hand firmly over his, stopping him. It's not that simple, I said. We need to talk about what happens now. Mom, look what I found. Michael, 10 years old, ran up to me, clutching a black leather wallet. We were at the mall. I had just left his parent-teacher conference. Where did you find that, honey? Over there, near the bathroom. It has a lot of money inside. I opened the wallet. Sure enough, there were several crisp bills, along with documents and credit cards. Can we buy that video game I want? His eyes sparkled with pure, unadulterated anticipation. I closed the wallet and knelt to his height. Michael, this isn't ours. Someone lost it and must be desperately searching for it. But no one will know we found it, he argued, his voice dropping to a low conspiratorial whisper. We would know, I replied, holding his small hands in mine. And that's what matters most. A person's character isn't truly shown by what they do when everyone is watching, but by what they do when no one is looking. We took the wallet to the information desk. 2 hours later, we received a call from the owner, an elderly gentleman who wept on the phone, explaining that every penny of his retirement money had been in there. The next day, he appeared at our house with a small video game for Michael. It's not the latest model, the man said, his voice trembling. But it's what I can offer as thanks. My son's face lit up, not just from the gift, but from the quiet satisfaction of having done the right thing. Remember that wallet, Michael? I asked, pulling him back to the present. Remember what I taught you that day? He looked away, a flicker of shame crossing his features, but nodded slightly. What happened to that boy? To your values? Life happened, Mom. he replied, his voice rough with bitterness. The competition, the pressure, the expectations. You don't know what it's like out there. I know it's hard. I know the world can be cruel. But that doesn't justify becoming part of the cruelty yourself. Michael took a ragged breath, running a hand over his face. What are you planning to do with that? He pointed to the USB drive. It depends on you, I replied. I'm giving you a chance, son. A chance to do the right thing. The right thing? He let out a humorless laugh, a harsh, grating sound. You want me to turn myself in? To go to jail? I want you to take responsibility for your actions, to seek to repair the damage you've caused. There are legal avenues for that. Cooperating with authorities, a plea bargain. And destroy my life, my marriage, my career? Your life is already being destroyed by what you've done, Michael. You just haven't realized it yet. He leaned back in his chair, his face a tortured mask of inner conflict. What if I refuse? I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat thick and heavy. This was the hardest part. Then I'll have to make a very painful decision. You'd turn me in? The disbelief in his voice was a sharp blade twisting in my gut. Your own flesh and blood? Precisely. Because you're my flesh and blood, I cannot allow you to continue down this path, I replied, my voice thick with unshed tears. I love you too much to be an accomplice to your destruction. Mom, I can't stand this school anymore. Everyone makes fun of me because I don't have name-brand sneakers because my backpack's old. Michael, 18 years old, threw his backpack onto the sofa in a fit of furious frustration. I had just gotten home from my second teaching shift, utterly exhausted, but I still had papers piled high, waiting to be graded. Son, you know I do what I can. I'm a teacher, not a CEO. Marcel's dad offered jobs to some students at his company. Part-time, cash payments, off the books. I dropped the papers I was organizing. What kind of job? He shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Helping with deliveries, carrying some boxes. Nothing big. Something in his tone set off immediate alarms. Michael, look at me. What kind of deliveries? He hesitated, shifting his weight. I don't really know. Marcel said it's office supplies, but it's gotta be done at night, and it pays really well. I stood up and gently held his face between my hands. Son, you're too smart to believe that. Marcel's dad was investigated for smuggling last year, remember? But Mom, it's so much money. In 1 month I could buy good sneakers, new clothes. And in 2 months, you could be in jail. Or worse. I gripped his hands tightly. Michael, easy money always comes with a price, and usually it's much higher than we imagine. He remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Promise me you won't take this job. I promise. He mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. That night, I made a sacrifice he never knew about. I sold the only valuable thing I had left, an antique watch that had belonged to my father. With the money, I bought Michael a pair of name-brand sneakers. They weren't the most expensive, but they were enough so he wouldn't feel humiliated at school. When he asked how I'd gotten the money, I just smiled and said, "Sometimes life surprises us with little miracles." Remember those sneakers, Michael? I asked, bringing us back to the present moment in the coffee shop. Those Nikes you wanted so badly? He furrowed his brow, momentarily confused by the sudden shift in conversation. I remember. You said it was a miracle. I sold your grandfather's watch, the only valuable heirloom I had left from my family. His eyes widened in shock. Why did you never tell me? Because it wasn't important for you to know the sacrifice itself. What was important was for you to understand the value of honesty, of hard-earned effort, even when it feels easier to succumb to temptation. Michael lowered his head, and I saw his shoulders begin to tremble. For the first time since we sat down, he cried. Not the calculated, manipulative tears I'd seen so often from Jessica, but the raw, genuine sobs of someone who finally saw the gaping abyss they dug for themselves. I ruined everything, didn't I? His voice was choked, broken. I disappointed you. I disappointed Dad. I reached my hand across the table and gently touched his arm. There's still time to fix things, son. It won't be easy, but I'll be right beside you. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. Jessica will never accept it. She'll leave me if I confess. Then perhaps she's not the right person for you. Michael took a shuddering breath, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. A gesture that so acutely reminded me of him as a child, it made my heart ache. What should I do, Mom? First, find a good lawyer. Someone who specializes in white-collar crime. Then consider a plea bargain. If you cooperate fully with the investigations, the consequences might be less severe. He nodded slowly, processing my words. And Jessica? That's up to you, son. But remember, anyone who encourages you to do wrong doesn't truly have your best interests at heart. We sat in silence for a few minutes, each absorbing the immense weight of that conversation. Finally, Michael slowly extended his hand. Can I see the flash drive? I hesitated for a brief moment, then handed it to him. He held it, looking at the small object as if it contained his entire future, his destiny. I'm going to do the right thing, Mom. I promise. For the first time that day, a fragile sense of relief settled over me. It wasn't the end of the journey. Far from it. It was merely the arduous first step on a difficult path. But it was a step in the right direction. The following weeks were a dizzying whirlwind. Michael, following my steadfast advice, sought out a respected criminal defense attorney. Dr. Owens, a distinguished man with a mane of white hair and a penetrating gaze, listened to the entire story without judgment. Your son has two clear options, he explained to me during a private consultation. Wait to be discovered, which is practically inevitable given the relentless progress of the investigations, or get ahead of it and cooperate. The second option could mean the critical difference between actual jail time and alternative sentencing. Michael chose to cooperate. The decision unleashed an immediate tempest in his personal and professional life. As anticipated, Jessica reacted with explosive fury when he informed her of his choice. "Are you insane?" she shrieked as he later recounted. "You're going to throw everything away because of your mother's ridiculous scruples?" It's not her scruples, Jess. It's the values I always held, the ones I simply abandoned along the way. The argument culminated in her packing her bags and storming off to a friend's house. 3 days later, a lawyer contacted Michael to discuss the terms of their divorce. At work, Michael tendered his resignation before the story could break. His boss, with a wry, almost ironic detachment, even tried to convince him to stay. Everyone makes a few adjustments to the books, Michael. You don't have to be so dramatic. Those weren't a few adjustments, Mr. Sterling. That was deliberate fraud. And no, not everyone does. The plea bargain was a long, excruciating process. Michael had to meticulously detail every aspect of the scheme, implicating colleagues and superiors, surrendering countless documents and pieces of evidence. In return, he received partial immunity. He would still face consequences, but not the severe prison sentence that would have otherwise been his fate. Throughout this arduous period, he stayed with me at Nancy's apartment. My sister, upon hearing the full, unvarnished story, simply nodded in her practical, unwavering way. Family's family. We're in this together. Those were truly difficult months. Michael lost significant weight, battled insomnia, and endured waves of anxiety attacks. The divorce was bitterly contentious. Jessica fought tooth and nail to retain the apartment and assets, disingenuously claiming no knowledge of her husband's illegal activities. But the irrefutable evidence Michael provided proved otherwise. One evening, about 4 months after our pivotal conversation at the coffee shop, I found my son sitting alone on Nancy's balcony, gazing out at the glittering city lights. "Everything okay?" I asked, settling quietly beside him. "I'm thinking about how I threw away everything I built," he replied, his voice a low, heavy murmur. "My marriage, my career, the respect of my colleagues." "You didn't throw it away, Michael. You chose to rebuild on solid ground, instead of desperately clinging to a sandcastle that would, sooner or later, inevitably collapse." He turned to me, his eyes reflecting the distant, shimmering lights. "Do you think I'll ever be able to forgive myself?" "I think you already have," I replied, reaching out to gently hold his hand. Forgiveness truly begins when we decide to change direction. "Mommy, why did Daddy have to leave?" Michael, just 2 years old, asked as I tucked him into bed. His father had passed away 3 months prior, a victim of a car accident. How does one even begin to explain death to such a small child? I sat on the edge of the bed, adjusting his superhero blanket. "Remember when we went to the park and saw that butterfly emerging from its cocoon?" He nodded, his little eyes wide with innocent curiosity. Daddy's like that butterfly. He needed to leave his body, his cocoon, to fly to a very special place. Will he come back? I swallowed the lump that had risen in my throat. Not in the way we knew him, but he's always right here. I touched his small chest. In your heart. And here, I touched his forehead. In your memories. And in your heart too, Mommy. Yes, my love. Forever in my heart. Michael pondered this for a moment. Then a small smile bloomed on his face. So he never really leaves, right? Never, I confirmed, kissing his forehead. The people we truly love never truly leave us. Nila Sathasha. A year after the plea bargain, things were finally beginning to stabilize. My apartment had been thoroughly renovated and I was able to move back home. Michael, diligently fulfilling his alternative sentences, which included community service and substantial fines, had rented a small apartment close to mine. He found work as a professor of financial mathematics at a community college, ironically, following in my footsteps in education. The salary was a mere fraction of what he earned before, but as he often said, his voice imbued with genuine contentment, "Now I can sleep at night." Jessica, on the other hand, wasn't so fortunate. Without the crucial cooperation Michael offered, she faced more severe consequences, including a period of house arrest. The divorce was finalized with an equitable division of assets, less than she had vehemently fought for, but in my opinion, more than she truly deserved. One Sunday afternoon, Michael arrived for lunch carrying a small, wrapped box. "What's this?" I asked, as I served the spaghetti and meatballs he loved so much. "Open it," he said, a small, hopeful smile playing on his lips. Inside the box lay an antique watch. Not the exact one that had belonged to my father, but remarkably similar. "I found it at an antique shop," Michael explained, his gaze earnest. "I know it's not the same, but I thought it could be a new beginning. A new memory." Tears welled in my eyes as I fastened the watch onto my wrist. "It's perfect, son." After lunch, we sat on the small balcony of my apartment, sipping coffee and watching the gentle rhythm of the street below. "You know, Mom," Michael said, breaking a comfortable silence, "sometimes I think about what Dad would say about all of this." I smiled, my mind drifting to my husband, a simple, honest man who had died far too young. He'd be immensely proud to see the man you've become. Not for what happened, but for finding your way back. "You really think so?" "I know so. Your father always used to say that a person's true character isn't shown when everything's going well, but when they face their own flaws, head on." Michael nodded slowly, lost in thought. "I still have a long way to go." "We all do," I replied, a gentle squeeze to his hand. "That's life. A path we build with every step, sometimes stumbling, sometimes running, but always moving forward." We sat in silence again, simply appreciating the soft breeze of that quiet Sunday afternoon. It wasn't some storybook happy ending. There were scars, lingering consequences, profound regrets. But there was also a fresh start, invaluable lessons learned, and real, undeniable growth. And for me, Susan, a retired teacher at 67, there was this quiet, profound certainty that I'd done what absolutely needed to be done. It hadn't been easy. It had cost me sleepless nights, silent tears, agonizing moments of doubt. But looking at my son now, a man painstakingly rebuilding his life on a foundation of honesty, I knew, deep in my soul, that it had all been unequivocally worth it. Because sometimes, true love means making the hardest choices. It means confronting painful secrets and fiercely bringing them into the light. It means risking the possibility of losing someone to save them from themselves. And in the end, it means being there to painstakingly gather the shattered pieces and help rebuild, brick by painstaking brick, a life truly worth living. The watch on my wrist ticked away, marking not just the hours and minutes of the present, but the enduring narrative of a family that had faced its darkest secrets and found on the other side not perfection, but something infinitely more valuable: authenticity. And that, I realized at 67, is the greatest treasure we can possibly leave for those we love.